Welcome back to the channel, and this week we're raising the stakes and hopping back in the 1-3 streets.
For the year 2025, I'm trying to make $25 an hour while playing both 1-2 and 1-3. We just came off a month from hell, so let's see where we stand.
The month of May couldn't have gone much worse. We played just 15 hours and 5 minutes of poker and lost a total of $958. Nothing went our way, and to make matters worse, we lost all that money while just playing 1-2. Prior to May, we were on a roll, but our momentum has come completely to a halt. The good news is our 1-2 stats have kept us afloat. We played a total of 63 hours and 40 minutes and profited $1,926 for an hourly win rate of $30.25. Pretty content with this number, but needed to start trending upwards again. As for 1-3, we played a total of 35 hours and 30 minutes and profited $489 for an hourly win rate of $13.77. I haven't played enough hours in this game to put much thought into these numbers, but just glad they're in the positive. If we combine our stats, we played a total of 99 hours and 10 minutes of live poker and profited $2,415 for an hourly win rate of $24.35. The month of May was a big setback, but even after a disastrous 31 days, we've still managed to keep our hourly win rate barely under our goal of $25 an hour, so I can't be too upset. Just gotta keep a positive mindset and get things going back in the right direction. So enough with the ranting. Instead, let's head out to the nicest card room in Northern California, which is none other than Stone's Gambling Hall. We buy into the 1-3 match stack game for $500, which is the max to start the game, and we waste no time before jumping in on the action. In our first interesting hand of the day, we get involved in the local famous $15 bomb pot. 8 people decided to join the party, and we get dealt Ace-Jack offsuit, which is a pretty big hand for a bomb pot. With $120 already in the middle, we go straight to a flop of King-Jack-9 Rainbow, giving us middle pair best kicker. I'm first to act, start off with a check, and now a player in middle position throws out a pretty small bet of $30. Hijack calls, and action gets folded to me. We're sitting here with a pretty strong hand and getting an amazing price to continue, but the problem with bomb pots is our opponents can have any 2 cards. Since there's a straight possibility already out there, we could basically be drawing dead. Since there's already a bet and a call, I think we could assume at least one of them has a king. Even if we call and somehow hit an ace or a jack, we still might not be good. So instead of calling $30 to win $210, I decided to just play it super conservative and toss my hand in the muck. And glad I did, because both players ended up having a king, and the player in middle position ended up winning this pot with ace king, so if we hit an ace, we would have been screwed. If you guys ever play in a bomb pot, make sure to play them super safe and don't get married to an average hand. After failing a small bluff attempt with king-queen offsuit in a 3-way pot on an ace-high board, we then look down at good old pocket 10s in early position. There's one limp, and I decide to size up and raise the price of poker to $20 in order to deter people from making the call. That plan goes completely out the window because 4 people decided to join the party, so hopefully this is an early sign that we're in for an action-packed game. With $100 already in the pot, we go 5 ways to a flop of queen-3 deuce all diamonds, giving us second pair in the 10-high flush draw. Early position decides to take over the betting lead and throw out a decent-sized bet of $55. You could obviously be doing this with a queen, set, or flush, but this player is the definition of action, and in my opinion, he could also have the ace of diamonds in his hand to try and steal or bloat up the pot. So I'm not giving up just yet and putting the chips and everyone else gets out of the way. With $210 in the middle, the turn is a very interesting card in the queen of clubs, now pairing the top card. Our opponent now slows down and checks, so now it's decision time. Bet for protection or check it back. There's definitely merit to betting to get value and protection from the ace of diamonds, but I think if he had all those monster value hands like I mentioned earlier, he could be checking for deception to either let me catch up or go for the check raise. So instead of falling for the bait, I decide to check it back and see what he does on the river. Dealer burns a card and throws out the worst card in the deck in the ace of spades, because now all his semi-bluffs with the ace of diamonds make top pair. I was hoping our opponent would check and we could get to showdown, but instead he decides to throw out a pretty sizable bet of $150. Since we're beating nothing now, I decide to take the L and just toss my hand in the muck. Not off to the best start because we're quickly down around $160 in just 20 minutes. In this next hand, the hijack decides to limp. Cutoff now raises to $20, and I'm in the small blind and look down at the jackasses, pocket jacks. As we all know, there's no right way to play them, but the cutoff opens really wide, and I'm pretty confident I'm ahead of his range. So when that's the case, it's time to put more money in the pot. When action folds to me, I make it $90 to go for value, and now the big blind does something I wasn't expecting, decides to cold call the $90. As I mentioned in previous vlogs, cold calls are almost always pocket pairs or big Broadway cards, nothing else. Action folds back to the cutoff, who's now getting a great price to continue, so he slides in the $90 as well. So with $270 already in the pot, we're going 3 ways to a flop of Queen 8-5 with 2 spades giving us second pair. The reason I call pocket jacks the jackasses is because they always put me in some annoying ass spot where I have no idea what to do, especially out of position. There's both straight and flush draws available that we're ahead of. There's also an overcard that our opponents could have connected with. I could check and evaluate, but I would hate to give our opponents a free card and then a king or ace rolls out, putting ourselves in an even worse spot. So I decided to throw out a bet of $80, which is what I do with all my monsters. And now the big blind doesn't think 80 is enough and puts in a huge raise to 300. Cutoff ends up folding, and now action's on me with about 160 left in my stack. I end up going in the tank to see if I'm ever good in this spot. The big blind cold called our 3-bet pre-flop, so the range I'm putting him on after the flop is king queen, ace queen, pocket eights, or a hand like ace king of spades. Against that range, I'm either drawing to 2 outs or coin flipping at best, so even though I'm getting pretty decent odds, I decide to toss the jackasses right where they belong, which is right in the muck. The big blind is a friend of the vlog and told us he had pocket eights for flop middle set, so I hate to lose the pot, but glad we made the right fold. We're now officially getting our ass kicked and down over $335 in just 30 minutes. There's a lot of session left and the stakes are big, so we just got to keep a positive mindset and stay optimistic. Next hand up after that disaster with the jacks, a player in early position raises to $13, middle position calls, and once again I'm in the small blind and look down at the least popular hand in low stakes poker, an ace king offsuit. Obviously good enough for a raise, so I make it $60 to go, and both players end up putting in the chips. So we're going 3 ways out of position with 180 already in the middle, and the flop rolls out 10-9-8 rainbow, which is horrible for our range, also horrible for our specific hand. I decide to start off with a check, looking to give up if someone bets, but surprisingly action gets checked around, and glad it did because the turn peels off the ace of spades, giving us top pair best kicker and putting 2 spades on the board. No checking now, so I throw out a value bet of 105 and just get called by the original raiser, increasing this pot to 390. Off to a river, and it rolls out the 10 of clubs, pairing the board. I actually loved seeing this card because I think our opponent would have bet all his 10x hands after I checked it over to him on the flop, so I'm not worried that I'm beat here. The only question now is how much to bet for value. I think his range mainly consists of small suited aces, and in order to get called by those, I need to bet on the smaller side. I would hate to bet too much and give him the opportunity to fold, so I settle on a value bet of $125, and our opponent wastes no time before putting in the chips. I roll over my hand and he shows ace queen offsuit, which we barely have outkicked. If I knew he was that strong, I would have sized up a bit more, but I'll never complain anytime money is pushed in my direction. Looking to keep it going in this next hand when the $6 button straddle is on, and a player in early position just calls the $6. Folds me in middle position, and I look down at my favorite hand in poker, which is Jack 10 suited. Never just calling here, so I make it $25 to go, get called by the cutoff, button, and the limper. Going 4 ways to a flop of ace 10-6 with 2 hearts and 1 diamond, giving us middle pair and some backdoor draws. Early position checks, and I think we could go either way between betting and checking. If I had position on everyone, I'd probably bet, but since there's 2 players still left to act, I decide on a check to see what they do and try to pick up information. Cutoff checks, but now the button decides to throw out a bet of $45. I doubt he's betting a 10 into 3 people, so I think he either has an ace or a flush draw and not much else. Folds to me, and since we're over $800 effective, I think we're getting a decent price to continue and improve. So I put in the chips, increasing this pot to 190, and the cutoff gets out of the way to make things a little easier on us. Off to a turn, and it peels off the 8 of diamonds, now giving us a flush draw to go along with our pair. No point in betting, so I check, and now our opponent decides to check it back. Not too shocked by this play, because if he had a weak ace, he wouldn't want to bloat up the pot, and if he had a flush draw, he probably wants to see a free river. So hoping for a blank, but the river rolls out the deuce of hearts, bringing in the front door flush, which is the wrong red suit we were looking for. I check, hoping he checks it back, but now our opponent throws out a bet of $145, and now we have just an easy fold. After a little run of being card dead, we finally picked up a premium. In this hand, Under the Gun decides to open the action to $20, hijack calls, I'm in the small blind and look down at the Cowboys, pocket kings. If I was in position, I'd probably put in a 3-bet around $75 to make sure I get action, but since I'm in the worst position possible, I need all the protection I could get. So I decided to size up and put in a 3-bet to $100 even. Original razor folds, but now the hijack decides to double flat and put in the extra $80. I doubt he'd ever play a monster hand this way, so the main range I'm putting him on is small pocket pairs, suited aces, and suited connectors. Keeping that in mind, we're going heads up to a flop of ace king deuce with 2 spades, giving us middle set. Whenever you flop a monster and you unblock top pair, and there's a flush draw available, it's super important to never slow play. On this board, a hand like pocket nines is never calling a bet on any street, so it's important to target all his aces, flush draws, and pray he has pocket deuces. So I take my own advice and start off with a value bet of $100, and he snap folds. I was hoping he had spades or a hand like ace jack, but can't get too greedy after scooping in an easy profit. After winning a small pot with ace jack, we're once again barely above the even mark. In this next hand, the $6 straddle is on, and a tighter player opens the action to $15 in early position. Folds me on the button, and once again I look down at my favorite hand in poker in Jack 10 suited, but this time in the heart variety. Against some players I'd raise in position, but this time I decide to just call since I'm probably up against a decent pair or overcards. For only $9 more, the straddler calls as well, so we're going 3 ways to a flop of Jack 10-7 with 2 diamonds, giving us top 2 pair on a super connected board. Surprisingly, both players check it over to me, and even though we're holding a monster, this isn't the board you want to slow play. So I size up to $30 for value and just get called by the straddler. I'm basically putting him on a Jack, 10, or a million diamond draws because he's probably defending his straddle for only $9 more with any suited hand. So keeping that in mind, we're off to a turn which rolls out the King of Hearts. He checks, and it's possible we don't have the best hand anymore, but that won't deter me from betting because now any hand containing a queen picked up a straight draw. So I size up and throw out a bet of $90, and without any hesitation at all, our opponent snap calls, increasing this pot to $285. Since he snap called and didn't think twice about raising, I think we could narrow his range even more. I think he has a diamond draw like we mentioned earlier, or has a hand like Queen Jack or Queen 10 that picked up a straight draw to go along with their pair. So off to a river we go, hoping for a non-diamond low card. It rolls out the 3 of diamonds, bringing in the front door flush. I was hoping our opponent would check and I could snap check it back, but instead of making my life easy, he now leads into us for $225. At this point, I'm basically putting him on a flush and a flush only, because a morning 1-3 player isn't turning a hand like ace 10 with the ace of diamonds into a bluff. So despite having 2 pair, I reluctantly toss my hand in the muck, and once again we're stuck on the day. Looking to get some revenge in this next hand when I throw on the $6 straddle, and a player in middle position opens the action to $25 and gets called by the low jack and the button. Folds to me, and I look down at king-queen offsuit. Occasionally I'd put in a 3-bet squeeze with this hand, but the player who opened has mainly been limping all his holdings all day, so I'm putting him on a tighter range. So instead of raising, I decide to defend my straddle. I throw in the extra $19, and we're off to a flop 4 ways of queen 8-6 with 2 spades giving us top pair second best kicker. Hard to ask for a much better flop 4 ways, since 2 pairs should never be represented. I start off with a check. Now the original raiser decides to check, so I think he either has a pair smaller than a queen or some random Broadway cards. Low jack checks as well, but now the button throws out a bet of $60. I debated raising for a second, but ended up deciding against it for no reason other than being a little... never mind. So I end up calling. Original raiser gets out of the way, but the low jack decides to come along as well, increasing this pot to $280. Off to a turn 3 ways, and it rolls out the 4 of hearts, now putting 2 flush draws on the board. We check to the button again, and now he keeps the aggression going and throws out a bet of $175. Now I'm a little worried because he's been firing non-stop at this pot and hasn't been out of line all session. He could have ace-queen, pocket 8s, or pocket 6s, but I figured he could still be betting this size with queen jack and queen 10 for value, which is why I end up sliding in calling chips. Low jack thinks for a little, and ends up calling as well, so I'm mainly putting him on a draw since he would have raised with all his big hands by now. We're basically hoping for any non-spade and non-heart, and our wish is granted, kinda, when it rolls out the jack of diamonds. All the flush draws bricked out, but now we lose to one of the few value hands we were beating in queen jack. So I start off with a check, hoping to get to showdown. Low jack checks, and the button debates putting more money in the middle, but checks it back. I roll over my hand, and it's good after both players toss their hands in the muck. No clue what they had, and to be honest, I couldn't give 2 shits because I just got one thing to say.
Tell them to bring me my money.
After winning that hand, we get to do my favorite thing at 1-3, which is to color up some of our profits and turn $5 red chips into $25 green ones. So things are rolling, and we're up over $450, but then we pick up the jackasses and lose around $145, which isn't a shock to anyone, and then we won a few orbits without picking up shit, so now we're only up around $275. Not too shabby, but would love to get it back now. For this one, early position limps, cutoff now raises to 15, and I'm in the big blind and look down at ace-jack of hearts. Since we're pretty deep and a player in late position raised, I'm going to be 3-betting this hand every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So I make it $50 to go, and surprisingly just the early position limper puts in the call, and not the player who made it 15. Not what I was expecting, but here we go. Off to a flop heads up, and it rolls out queen 8-6 with 2 hearts, giving us the nut flush draw. No point in betting small since we have the range advantage and a ton of equity against any other holding, so I size up to $75 and our opponent goes in a mini tank. He eventually ends up letting it go, and we take down the pot with just ace high. Unfortunately, that was our last interesting hand of day 1, so let's get to the outro.
Glad we were able to keep our composure after being stuck early on. In for 1,000 and out for $13.23 for a solid win of $323 to start the week.
Day 2 got off to a slow start because we were down around $75 before our first interesting hand of the day. For this hand, there's 2 limps in early position, and I'm in the cutoff and look down at jack 9 of diamonds. Good enough for a raise in position, so I make it $25 to go and get called by the big blind in both limpers, increasing this pot to $100 even. Off to a flop 4 ways of king 8 deuce with 2 diamonds, giving us a jack high flush draw. Checks to me. I think this is the perfect board to c-bet because I have all the strong king x hands in my range. So I throw out a c-bet of $45, but now the big blind raises to $110. Folds back to me, And this raise looks super strong because I was the pre-flop raiser betting into 3 people on a king high board, and he still decided to raise. Since the king isn't a diamond, I'm putting him on king x of diamonds, pocket eights, pocket deuces, and not much else. Could be up against bigger diamonds, but never folding for only $65 more, especially in position, so I put in the call, increasing this pot to $320 total. Off to a turn, it rolls out the 3 of hearts, which shouldn't change anything. Our opponent doesn't slow down and now sizes up to 165. If I had the nut flush draw, I would debate calling in this spot because an ace might give us more outs, but since I'm not getting a good price to continue, I might even be up against higher diamonds, I just toss my hand in the muck and live to see another day. Would have loved to start off the day winning a huge pot, but that definitely hasn't been our MO this year. A little later on, we look down at our least favorite Broadway hand in poker, in King Jack offsuit. Early position limps, and I raise the price of poker to $15. Guess the big blind and limp are both like this price, because they put in the chips, so we're going 3 ways to a flop of King 9 deuce rainbow, giving us top pair solid kicker. Checks to me, I figure I'm either way ahead or way behind in this spot, so there's no point in betting big. I throw out the same bet of $15 targeting a worse king, a 9, or gut shot straight draws, and just get called by the big blind. Off to a turn, it rolls out the 9 of spades pairing the board. Big blind checks, and I figured my hand should only go for 2 streets of value since a 9 can definitely be in his range, so I check it back. Off to a river, and it peels off the 10 of spades, bringing in the backdoor flush and queen jack for the straight. Our opponent decides to check it over again, and since he was in the big blind, I'd figure he'd be calling my raise with a ton of shitty suited king hands that we can get value from. So with $75 in the pot, I figured I'd get called by all those weaker kings, so I throw out a bet of $40. Our opponent cuts out the chips, looking like he's about to call, but now he adds a stack of red to the mix and puts in a raise to 145. I always make a point that turn and river raises are almost never a bluff. With this specific run out, I just don't see a hand that we're beating that would play this way. So I confidently toss my hand in the muck, and we are officially getting smoked. In order to not be the short stack, I add on $500 to my stack, and within an hour we're already into the game for $1,000 total. In this next hand, action folds me in the hijack, and I look down at the jackasses, pocket jacks. I raise the price of poker to $15 and get called by both the hijack and cutoff. Off to a flop 3 ways of queen 8-6 with 2 hearts, giving a second pair on a connected board. Could go either way between a bet or a check, but since I'm out of position against 2 players, I figured a check would be the best play because I could pick up valuable information based off what they do. Both players end up checking behind, so I think it's safe to assume no one has a queen, and we currently have the best hand. Off to a turn, and it rolls out the 9 of hearts, putting 2 hearts on the board. Could start off with a bet now, but I kinda wanted to underrep my hand for another street. Hijack checks, but now the cutoff decides to throw out a bet of $20. There's 0 point in raising with my specific hand, so I put in the call, and the hijack gets out of the way. With $85 in the pot, the river rolls out the queen of spades, now pairing the board. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't think our opponent has a queen because he would have betted on the flop, so I'm mainly putting him on a pair that was betting for protection on the turn. I would hate to see him check it back and get to showdown, so I decided to take back the betting lead myself. I figured a pair smaller than a queen can't face too much heat, so I settle on a bet of $35, and our opponent ends up sliding in the chips. After I roll over my hand, he ends up tossing his in the muck. Feels like it's been forever, but we finally do something good and win a pot with the jackasses. Looking to keep the momentum going when we get involved in another local famous $15 bomb pot. Only 5 people decided to join the party, and we get dealt 8-7 offsuit. Off to a flop with $75 in the pot, and it comes out 10-6-5 with 2 spades, giving us the open-ended straight draw. Action checks to the button, who now throws out a bet of $30. I debated raising, but didn't really see a point since the pot was so small, which makes my fold equity a lot less likely against a 10. So I just call, and so does the hijack, increasing this pot to 165. Off to a turn, and it peels off the best card in the deck in the 9 of hearts, giving us the nut straight and making this board super connected. I don't see the point in checking and allowing our opponents to see a free river because I need all the protection I could get. So I lead out for $105, figuring I'd get called by most flush draws and pair plus straight draws, but both opponents end up folding and we take down a solid profit in a bomb pot. After being stuck pretty big early on, we've cut the deficit to just being down 120 by scooping in some solid pots in the last few orbits. Gonna do my best to keep building on this momentum. Next hand up is an interesting one. Early position decides to just call the $3 blind, and I'm in the low jack and look down at ace-8 of diamonds. Any suited ace in position is always a raise in my opinion, so I make it $20 to go and get called by the button and the limper. Going 3 ways to a flop of 8-7-7 rainbow with 1 diamond giving us top pair with a backdoor flush draw. Pretty good flop, so when it checks to me I throw out a value bet of $30 and just get called by the player in early position, doubling this pot to 120. Off to a turn, we pick up additional equity with the nut flush draw when it peels off the 4 diamonds. I was expecting the player in early position to check and flow, but now he decides to lead out for a half pot bet of $60. To me, this play screams that he has trip sevens or a straight. If you think about it, the flop was super dry, so if I'm c-betting with a hand like ace-king, he wouldn't want to raise with trips and scare me away, but now that the board has 2 flush draws available, I think he's scared if he checks and I check it back, he'll lose out on value. So thinking he has a monster, I decide to just play it safe and stick in the call, doubling this pot once more to 240. Hoping for an 8 or a diamond, but it peels off the 6 of spades, bringing in the front door flush and a 1-liner to the straight. Doesn't seem like he's afraid of either of these outcomes because he decides to go all in for his remaining stack of 205. In my opinion, this line is such an underbluff spot, so I waste no time before just tossing my hand in the muck, knowing my top pair is no good. Even though the line he took was super unorthodox, just showed so much strength and I wasn't paying $205 to find out what I already knew. I decided to seat change to get a better view for the vlog, and I almost wish I didn't because we went over an hour before getting involved in any real pots. It was a straight fold fest and missing flops completely, so I think it's safe to say I was starting to get a little impatient. In this next hand, a player in early position opens to $10, 3 people call, and I'm in the big blind and look down at Jack-10 offsuit. If this hand was suited, there's merit to putting in a 3-bet squeeze since there's so much playability, but being that it's offsuit, I decided to just call for only $7 more. Off to a flop 4 ways of ace-9-8 with 2 clubs, giving us the open-ended straight draw. I start off with a check, and the original raiser throws out a c-bet of $15. He's been pretty snug all day, so since he bet into 3 people on an ace-high board, I think he has an ace at minimum. The cutoff and button both call the $15. I don't see a point in raising, so I call the 15 as well, increasing this pot to $100 even. Off to a turn, and peels off the king of clubs, bringing in the front door flush. I check again, and surprisingly action gets checked around now. I figured if the original raiser had ace-king for top 2 pair, he would still bet for value, and I guarantee the other 2 players who checked behind would have also bet their flushes. So my read on the situation is no one has a flush, set, or 2 pair, and all their ranges are capped. Still going 4 ways to a river, and it peels off a complete blank in the 5 of hearts. My initial instinct was to lead out and bluff to try and steal this pot, but the problem is there's only $100 in the middle, and low stakes players hate folding top pair in small pots. Since this pot is so small, I don't think there's an amount that I could bet that someone with an ace will fold, so I decide to check. Now the original raiser throws out a pretty small bet of $35. Without any hesitation, the cutoff puts in the call, and button gets out of the way. Now action's on me, I don't feel like giving up on this pot. I'm pretty confident in my read that no one has 2 pair or flush, so I decided to go for the super rare river check raise bluff and throw out 7 green chips for a bet of $175. In my head, by making this raise, I would rep the flush and put massive pressure on an ace, forcing them to fold. But that plan goes quickly to shit because the player in early position snap calls and cutoff gets out of the way. I proudly roll over my jack high and just as expected, he shows ace-10 offsuit for just an average top pair. Looking back, I don't think my line made much sense, because if I had a flush, I probably would have let out on the river, afraid it would get checked through. And although I'm not happy with the result, I'm pretty content with the fact that I'm expanding my horizons and trying new plays. The beauty about this vlog is I could look back and reflect on my plays, so in the future, if I have a flush in this spot, and I think my opponents will go for thin value, I could use this exact play to get max value. With poker, you always have to keep a glass half full mindset, especially after making some dumbass plays, or else this game will eat you alive. Just a few hands later, I'm in the cutoff and look down at 8-6 of clubs. Plenty good enough for a raise in late position, so I make it $20 to go over a $6 straddle and just get called by the big blind. Going heads up to a flop of ace-9-5 with 2 clubs, giving us both a straight and a flush draw. He checks, and with so much equity, I start off with a bet of $25 to which he snap calls, increasing this pot to $95. Off to a turn, and it peels off the 6 of hearts, giving us a pair. He checks again, and even though I have showdown value now, I think it's super important to keep betting in this spot, and here's why. When our opponent snap called on the flop, he's basically saying he has a weak ace, since he would have 3-bet his big ones, a pair of 9s, or a flush draw that's most likely bigger than ours. If he has a flush draw, then we now have him beat and we should bet for value and protection. If he has a 9, then we should also bet to try and get him to fold, which would be a huge win for us. If he has a weak ace, I'm not expecting him to fold just yet, but if we keep betting and if we miss our draw on the river, we could rep a hand like ace-king and apply max pressure in hopes he folds. Given all those scenarios, there's no point in betting small, so I size up to $100 and overbet the pot. Our opponent now goes deep in the tank for over 2 minutes and eventually ends up folding ace-8 of spades face up, which is a huge win for us. Whether a scenario works out like it did in this hand, or you look like a complete idiot like I did in the last hand with Jack-10, it's super important to analyze each spot you're in and just go with your gut. Sometimes it'll work perfect, and other times you'll fail miserably, but life's too short for any regrets. Was hoping to make a comeback after getting the best hand to fold, but the deck did us no help. We kept getting dealt shitty hand after shitty hand, and the ones that were decent just missed the board completely. Unfortunately, the miracle comeback just isn't in the cards for today's session, so let's get to the outro.
Could have limited the damage if I didn't attempt that bluff with Jack-10, but regardless, I was just never winning today. In for 1,000, and out for 457 for a $543 loss.
We didn't play the first week of June because we were sick, so as for this week in poker, we started off great but had a disappointing finish. We played a total of 6 hours and 10 minutes of 1-3 and lost $220 for an hourly win rate of negative $35.68. Nothing I really could have done that second session to make this week profitable with the hands we were dealt, so I can't be too upset. Our 1-2 stats stayed the same since we didn't log any hours in this vlog, but unfortunately our 1-3 stats took a little hit. We've played a total of 41 hours and 10 minutes of 1-3 and profited a measly $269 for an hourly win rate of $6.46. The swings in this game are massive, and one session can skew these numbers like crazy, so I just gotta be happy we're in the positive and look to play better in the future to increase these numbers. Combining these stakes, we played a total of 105 hours and 20 minutes and profited $2,195 for an hourly win rate of $20.84. We're currently on an $1,178 downswing, which has drastically affected our hourly win rate, but nothing to do than just come back next week with a strong mindset and try to get Lady Luck back on our side. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope you guys run good at the tables, and I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button to help me reach my year-end goal of 20,000 subscribers.